We are going to talk about a label that we hear often, and I'm going to tell you which one that is in just a minute. Let's see here. I'm just still rattled. And it's sometimes, and this is kind of a segue with what's been going on with me the last few minutes here. And I appreciate your patience because I'm about 25 minutes late. And it's because my camera just decided it was going to play hide and seek with me. And like I said, I didn't realize it had this little sliding switch right up there at the top. And apparently, I slid it off. And it kept giving me a message that it's been blocked by my laptop or a switch. And I'm like, blocked? How can it be blocked? So anyway, so I got on chat GPT and kind of helped me figure out what was going on. And it was a whole several moments, like 20 minutes of trying to figure all this out. And honestly, it is the perfect segue for tonight's spotlight session, which is inconsistent to expansive, because life doesn't always go according to plan. As you know, sometimes our rhythm gets disrupted one way or another. And sometimes, like today, we find ourselves adjusting, troubleshooting, and really just trying to find our way back to center, to calm in real time when things just aren't working out. And, sometimes what looks inconsistent on the outside is often just us trying to navigate a new situation, or maybe trying a different approach to something, or just really giving ourselves space to regroup. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about here on this spotlight session on reframing labels. And when I was having those tech issues a little bit ago, I was just so tempted to say, all right, forget it, let's just cancel. And then I said, no, I don't want to cancel. And you know what? The label that we're exploring today is something that I think a lot of high achieving people, let me turn this down, high achieving people um, end up with. And when we start changing things in our life, the way we approach things, the way we respond to things, it might look like we're being inconsistent, or people might feel, they call it inconsistent, or, what's going on with her? She's in a bad mood, or she's this and she's that. When often we're actually expanding. We are trying out new patterns, new rhythms, new ways of responding to some of those everyday things that we face that just haven't set well with us for a long time. We're experimenting with what fits, and we're letting old habits kind of fall away. And if you've ever felt like you're all over the place while you're growing, well, then this one's for you, because sometimes we just feel like we're all over the place. And like a few minutes ago, trying to get this camera to work and figure out what is going on and how can my laptop be blocking my webcam. I had no clue, and I was looking all up at the top for all those function keys, and I could not find a function key that had a little camera on it. And so I could not figure out what's going on. And then come to find out, it's just a simple lever at the very top of my screen that got shifted. And sometimes that's what happens. We're not even sure where all this trouble is coming from. And so, in my own life, especially when I've been going through some major transitions, some things that just weren't working for me anymore. Things I had to deal with, grief, when things happen in your life and things change instantly. Um, when I left full-time education, that was a big pivot for me and it was difficult. And I was rebuilding my own sense of identity. And there are seasons where I just did not feel steady at all. I felt off track. I felt indecisive. I felt like, what's going on? I felt like my capacity was changing from week to week. My energy just felt different. I sometimes felt motivated, other times I felt completely depleted. And that happens to all of us when our routines start shifting. And because I wasn't operating the way I always had, it looked and really it felt inconsistent. But what was really happening is I was learning who I was becoming in these new situations, in this new space that I found myself in. And I was just crying out new rhythms and not necessarily losing all the old stuff that I had done and that I found to be very beneficial and what really lit me up and all of those old passions. But I was just trying on some new things. And that happens a lot when we want to shift, we change, we grow. And sometimes when people that we communicate with every single day and that kind of know us, in the good times and the bad times, they sometimes can call us or view us as being inconsistent. And we can even say that about ourselves. We feel like we're inconsistent. We feel like we're all over the place. And what that might look like is if you start to pause before you automatically say yes, like you used to, or if you're deciding that you're not available in the same way you used to be, in that typical way that you used to respond to things, people reaching out to you, um, you might you might put them, kind of on guard. They're like, "What in the world is going on? How is this happening? What's going on? Why are they being so contrary?" Um, you're exploring new routines, new boundaries. You're shifting out of that autopilot. The things that high achievers do to maintain that busy, invested lifestyle, and then it also is like you're on autopilot and you do a lot of things just out of habit. And when you start shifting out of that autopilot and you start responding instead of just reacting to what's going on, you start looking within before you make a decision. When you start choosing what supports you and your goals, your values, instead of what drains you, people might see that as being inconsistent or not a team player. I say that a lot, or you don't care anymore. But you know what? None of these things are inconsistency. Those are all signs of expansion. Expansion. So type that word in the comments, expansion. And I want you to think about what that might look like in your life right now. So that's you, and that's me trying to find a rhythm that matches who we currently are, the season that we are currently in, and not the old one. Because a lot of things and changes and pivots that we make, we can't go back. A lot of it we don't have any control over. We can't go back. So we are growing, and you know that growth is not linear. Rarely is it linear. And it doesn't follow like a clean schedule, a clean um, start and finish. And it absolutely doesn't look predictable to people who are used to the old you. So let that sink in. You don't respond the way you typically have in the past. And people think, you know, you're not as predictable. Um, Maybe you're not as reliable as you used to be. But really, what it is you are experimenting. What feels right now with what's going on, with what I've been through, with the goals I have, the season of life I'm in? We're experimenting. We're testing our limits. We're adjusting our input and where we're going to expend our energy, sometimes where we're going to put our money. Because sometimes these decisions that we make are related to finances, and we're honoring our changing capacity. So maybe you were able to give if we're talking about money per se, or your time, or your other resources. And your capacity to do that is changing. And you're discovering what works for you now, not what worked then, what works now. And this behavior to someone who is actively and evolving feels a little uncomfortable. And maybe it looks a little inconsistent to people. So I want you to just take a breath with me and to think about an area in your life where you have been trying new rhythms. Maybe your morning routine has changed. Maybe you've stopped saying yes so quickly. Maybe you've decided that over functioning isn't what it's cracked up to be. You're not over functioning. You don't want to over function like you have in the past. And maybe even that emotional capacity that you have in very familiar situations, maybe that's even changing. It looks different than it used to, and that's really okay. So just take a breath and tell me, What is something that is coming to mind? Where in your current life right now have you been experimenting with something, with some of those things I just mentioned? Where are you actually being inconsistent or um, you don't really care or you're not a team player? Or are you really just allowing yourself to expand, to put your needs in perspective? And if you feel comfortable, you can share it in the comments if you'd like to. We can chat about it. You can message me. You don't even have to say anything if you don't feel like it. But I want you to really take a look at yourself and any situation that you may be um, is coming to mind with this conversation. And just say, am I really being inconsistent or am I just allowing myself to expand, to move into a new way of operating, a new MO? Expansion can feel really uncomfortable because sometimes we make it we feel guilty because of it. But you know what? It's not wrong. It's just new. And that's why it can feel uncomfortable. We sometimes want to place that guilt thing on there because it feels different. It feels uncomfortable. It's not something we're used to doing or saying, or it's not limits we're used to setting on other people. But you know what? It's just new. And when your energy shifts, when your clarity shifts, when your priorities shift, that's not something that you're doing wrong. It is self awareness. That is how self awareness works. That is how boundaries form. That is how people move from survival into growth. And write that in the comments if you want to. Type that word growth. We first typed expansion, then we typed growth. Trying new rhythms for yourself and for how you communicate and respond with others is not failure. It is feedback. And I want you to start looking at it that way, that you are becoming more self aware, and that is a good thing. And you are moving, shifting, pivoting from simply surviving and reacting to what's going on around you to truly making decisions that align with your goals, your values, and your aspirations for yourself. So instead of calling yourself inconsistent, I want you to try one of these reframes. So think about which one of these you could use when you start feeling those uncomfortable feelings for setting limits or boundaries. You can say, I'm learning what fits. I'm learning what works for me. I am allowed to evolve, to change, to do things differently than I have in the past. I'm expanding my capacity as a valuable person in my life and in the goals I've set for myself. I'm exploring new ways to support who I am as a person, not just who other people expect me to be. And you are simply paying attention to what is actually working for you now. So that is not instability, that is insight. Insight. So if today's reflection has helped you see your maybe shifting rhythms with more compassion, I hope it has. And you want some support in turning that awareness into maybe one next clear step for yourself. I would love to connect with you. So you are welcome to join me for one of my complimentary Clarity Kickstart coaching sessions. They're just short Zoom calls where we get together. We have a simple, grounded conversation on where you are right now, what's changing in your life, and we talk about mapping out maybe just that very next step. And if you enjoy this kind of weekly reset, I also offer clarity circles right here in the group Essentials for Peace and Balance. And for people who are listening on the YouTube channel, I have these clarity circles where we just get together, a small group of us, and we work on reflection, expansion, and really on a gentle structure for ourselves that can get rid of that feeling of being inconsistent or scattered and really embrace our ability to expand. So you don't have to do it all alone. I would love for you to connect with me on that so that we can move forward together. So thank you so much for joining me for this session and for being patient with me since, everything was kind of wacky there at the beginning and I was a little rattled, but I got my mojo back and we are going to meet again next week for another spotlight session on reframing labels. So hopefully I will see you next week. Bye bye.